Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening to everyone, and welcome to the webinar on a better local business environment for pandemic recovery in Southeast Asia. As we all know, MSMEs are pervasive in the region. They participate in production, in the delivery of services, and even in employing much of the workforce in the region. However, as the video showed us, they suffered quite immensely during the pandemic. So the focus of today's webinar is really to discuss how we can help MSMEs survive and recover in the recovery period and also alleviate the lives of everyone. So we have a good lineup of speakers. So without further ado, let me call on Director General for ADB Southeast Asia Regional Department, Ramesh Subramaniam, to deliver the opening remarks. Ramesh, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, James. Very good morning to all of you. I'm very, very happy to join all of you in this webinar. In fact, that video says it all in terms of what we want to discuss today. But before I share a few thoughts from ADB perspective, I wanted to greet each and every one of you, particularly the senior officials who are joining from Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam in particular. A few other countries are represented here as well, and particularly private sector representatives. Very happy to see the President of the Lao National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Odette Swanawong, as well as Undersecretary of State, Mr. Pen Sobichet from Ministry of Commerce, Cambodia, DG Enterprise Registration Department, Ministry of Industry and Commerce from Laopedia, Mr. Afishit Sensori Wong, and other colleagues from Deputy General Director of Legal Department, BCCI, Vietnam, Mr. Pham Ngoc Thach. And I wanted to appreciate the presence of Ms. Ming from the Technology Tech for Good Institute and Professor Michael Schaefer from ICS in Singapore. Thank you once again, all for joining. I'm going to cover two broad points in this perspective sharing. The first is the need to create sound business environments for micro and small and medium enterprises, particularly as the economies are in the post-pandemic recovery phase in Southeast Asia. As we saw in video, the role that is played, the phenomenal role, I would say, played by MSMEs is so critical, and it's incumbent on all of us to create pathways for their recovery so that the economies themselves can recover in a sustainable manner. The second point I wanted to cover, we all agree it's important, but how are we going to guide the transition process? So you'll see two slides. And as the slides get flipped, I'll cover a few points. So if you see the first slide, there are three reasons or 3 points rather, I wanted to share with you. First, micro and small and medium-sized enterprises, or MSMEs, are so critical. They're an integral part of the economies in Southeast Asia. They create jobs, they deliver essential goods and services to populations at large, particularly local populations. And they are a key conduit for promoting inclusiveness in the region, which is a top priority for all the countries at all times and for development institutions such as the Asian Development Bank. In Southeast Asia, as we saw in the video and as you see in the screen, MSMEs account for 97% of firms. That's a whopping number. 2/3 of jobs. That also is a huge number. And particularly noteworthy feature is a significant number of these jobs go to women, which is very, very critical to ensure inclusiveness. Account for 40% of GDP, and 80% of them are based outside of metropolitan areas in the Southeast Asian cities. Now, despite being such an important stakeholder in the development process, as we know, micro and small and medium enterprises, MSMEs, remain underrepresented or underrepresented sometimes in discussions on creating the enabling business environment, often sometimes appearing as an afterthought in the process. So that's the first point. Second, while the pandemic has obviously brought immense suffering to everyone in the region, the impact is particularly severe for MSMEs, which have suffered huge business and income losses from the lockdowns, from the social distancing rules, and also they've lost an immense amount of capital, which in turn has hindered their capacity to contribute to the economies during the recovery period. As we saw in almost every country, growth contraction took place and the recovery is tepid now, and particularly we have other global factors that are playing up as well, particularly the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the US interest rate hikes, which are putting dampening effects on economic recovery. And in that process, MSMEs are unfortunately likely to be affected even more. Third point, even before the pandemic started, business environment has been rapidly evolving, and this complexity, in some cases at least, made it more difficult for governments to design policies to optimize business opportunities for MSMEs, while also at the same time paving way for their development. So these are the three factors I wanted to share at the outset. Some of it you saw in the video, nothing like seeing a picture, seeing visuals. Now, I also want to acknowledge in various ADB assessments we've noted, including in a post-pandemic recovery, Southeast Asia rising from the pandemic report, which, by the way, James Villafiote, who spoke, authored the publication. Most governments have extended significant amounts of assistance to MSMEs during the pandemic, particularly financial assistance in the form of various subsidies, tax relief measures, as well as concessional financing, and in some cases, restructuring of their debt. ADB had a special window for COVID recovery called CPRO as part of that assistance given to many countries. Well, in this call, we have Cambodia that received significant assistance. Lao PDR in Vietnam received technical assistance support. Other countries received substantial financial support. In all of these, we've been tracking the support provided to MSMEs, which has been quite significant. Now, moving ahead, these enterprises, the MSMEs, face, unfortunately, a plethora of challenges from the rapidly changing internal as well as external business environment. Some of it is kind of endogenous, but some of it is imposed, exogenous. But unfortunately, the MSMEs need to deal with both sets of these constraints. Now, for most of them, the shift to digitalization, a critical tool that helps sustain business activity during the pandemic, is unfortunately not easy, especially not for the enterprises at the smaller end of the spectrum, which are often informal in nature. Now, second challenge is that as everyone is preparing for the recovery to be sustainable, to be green, and the so-called concept of BBB or Build Back Better, that transition is going to be challenging for MSMEs. Now, this would be particularly costly and, in fact, maybe beyond the reach of, again, the enterprises at the smaller end of the spectrum, the micro enterprises or the small and the informal businesses. Now, this is particularly a source of concern for us at the ADB because I think all the accomplishments, all the recovery process that countries are putting in place, now a lot more needs to be done for countries to meet the net zero commitments that many are making. Now, last but not the least, many of the MSMEs have accumulated pretty large debts. So the debt burden is quite heavy on them. And the servicing needs that arise from these debts obviously pose an enormous burden on the enterprises, what they contribute, as well as in some cases, particularly for informal businesses, it's a source of livelihoods that affects their families. And now all of us are facing an inflationary business environment, which is going to be a big challenge on these businesses, even large businesses. So just imagine what the MSMEs will be going through. Now, let me transition to the second point I wanted to make that you see on the second slide. What is the transition process and how all of us, various stakeholders in this call and you know, a whole range of stakeholders in the ecosystem, what roles can we play including particularly the MSMEs in helping the recovery process or in helping the transition process. Now, an important first step is to begin with a proper assessment of the baseline. And a key part of this in turn is to make sure that the MSMEs are given sufficient voice in identifying the critical risks and the challenges that face them, as well as in designing transformational policies, well, transitional policies, as well as how do we make sure that with all the changes that are happening around us, how do we make sure that those policies are transformational that can assist and help these MSMEs in managing the risks and the challenges they face. Now, a proper baseline can help us create a shared goal where the important critical needs of the MSMEs are jointly understood as well as prioritized within the overall goal to kind of create a common purpose in the recovery process. Now, MSMEs need to be brought into the conversation, given they're such an important stakeholder. Now, achieving a digitally capable, green, and inclusive local economy will not happen organically by markets alone. So it needs commitments from all, including MSMEs as a major stakeholder. Now, we see a strong potential for transition opportunities for MSMEs in all economies in ensuring an inclusive pandemic recovery. Now, understanding potential opportunities in this regard can be enabled through a mapping process that entails MSMEs' contribution in the local economies and what they need to do to transition. In this regard, better partnerships will enable the governments and MSMEs to co-design more appropriate regulations and enabling policies that drive progress to achieve the shared goals that I mentioned. Just a couple of examples. As poor households are often the owner-operators of particularly informal businesses, the micro end of the spectrum, and opportunities is to invest in flexible social protection systems that confers welfare support to these micro and informal sector enterprises. Just close your eyes and think through how tourism has been devastated. What can be done in this regard could be one specific example that we can all think about. Second, helping MSMEs access the digital economy is also very critical to address the business risks that they face, including shifting online in their business operations. Here, there are opportunities to leverage considerable benefits from existing platforms as well as new platforms that could be created. And for MSMEs to become a stronger partner in the green mode or in the green recovery process, more intentional efforts are needed to strengthen their capacity to adapt to climate change, making their participation accessible through initiatives that support renewables, as well as new renewable investments or opportunities, as well as retrofitting existing assets could help unlock this opportunity for MSMEs. Now, there is tremendous scope in all of this for local planning processes to identify opportunities for delivering special, innovative, customized solutions that are so important for MSMEs to help them in achieving the shared goal. And we believe genuinely that the opportunities are many. Now, to implement all these changes, we need a lot of forethought and a lot of planning. The issues that we are facing in front of us, they're quite complex, and planning and designing local and regional strategies obviously needs a high degree of cooperation at different levels. Now, between local and national levels, between public and private sectors, civil society needs to be brought in, particularly if you're looking at recovery options that will be hurting certain segments of population, and the international institutions like ADB that can provide significant support. Now, with the opportunities identified, it's important to think of certain clear transition targets that will support the changes that we want to see, and particularly that MSMEs and the governments want to see. And planning from this point onwards should involve not, innovation is a big word, but we need to contextualize innovation, and we need to make sure that innovations can help. They're practical for micro enterprises, particularly the informal businesses, as well as the small enterprises. We need to gather all our resources to, I would say, immediately come up with plans, and not just plans, but we need to ensure high quality implementation. And then finally, for all of these to succeed, we need good evaluation systems to make sure that we keep looking at what has been designed, how are things being implemented, what can be addressed in terms of any mid-course correction that we need to see. Because our assessment is that the recovery process, in some segments, it's going to be faster, but in some sectors of the economy, subsectors of the economy, it could be quite long drawn out, say over a 3 to even a 5-year period. And particularly green recovery, digitalization are going to be time consuming, resource intensive, and clearly it's important to make sure that we don't come up with a kind of a one size fit all type of approach. In that regard, having good evaluation systems is going to be very, very critical. Now, this is the task at hand, and then the issues are not easy, but I'm sure today this webinar will be having a very fruitful discussion to shed more light. We have experts from the Tech for Good Institute and from ICS, as well as the public sector and the private sector. So I'm actually very excited to listen to all of you and to learn from all of you. And I'm sure the participants will have a lot of perspectives to share as well. So with that, let me bring my overview to a close. And thank you all so much for patiently listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramesh. There's a lot of good thoughts there, and I couldn't agree more. Forethought, better planning, quality implementation, customized solution, better partnerships are what we need to transition to. A more inclusive, digitally ready, and green local economy. So Ramesh mentioned that technology is a game changer. So it was used during the pandemic to manage the restrictions from mobility restrictions. It was also used by most firms to manage supply chain disruption and to reach customers online. So to discuss how this technology can really help MSME in the recovery period and also uplift the lives of people in Southeast Asia, may I now call on Executive Director of the Technology for Good Institute, Ms. Ming Tang. Ms. Ming Tang, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, James. Friends from the ADB, fellow speakers and panelists, and to everyone attending this session today, good day, good morning, good afternoon. And many thanks for the ADB team for the opportunity to speak today. For those for whom I'm meeting for the first time on this webinar, let me introduce myself. I'm Ming Tan. I'm the founding executive director of the Tech for Good Institute. And the Institute is very new. We're a nonprofit organization founded by Grab only just last year, 2021. As our name suggests, the Institute is focused on supporting research and conversations around how the promise of technology and the digital economy may be leveraged to advance inclusive, equitable, and sustainable growth for Southeast Asia. At the ADB Seeds event in March, we held a workshop on shaping MSMEs' growth in the digital age. And at that workshop, we addressed the challenges and opportunities of MSME digitalization. Today, I'd like to build on Ramesh's points to consider what a digitally integrated MSME supportive business environment might look like, not just in Southeast Asia's post-pandemic recovery, but into the future as well. First, I'd like to highlight some innovation areas in the digital economy with significant potential to support MSMEs growth, building on Ramesh's call. And for this potential to be realized, I will then propose where the public and private sector can come together to enable this conducive environment for MSMEs to not only survive, but thrive. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has significantly changed the way we connect and buy. We've heard about some of the government interventions, but from a consumer side, the Tech for Good Institute's Platform Economy in Southeast Asia report found that 30% of surveyed consumers in 6 Southeast Asian countries started using digital services only during the pandemic last year. And my colleague will share the link via the Zoom chat later. And more interestingly, 90% of those express that they are likely to continue to buy and to transact online. And today, 1 in 2 of the consumers have adopted mobile internet and digital payments. But on the other hand, while many companies have began or accelerated their digital journeys during the pandemic, only 1 in 5 MSMEs are currently serving their customers in online to offline platforms. So I guess today, what I'd really like to do is to highlight 3 areas of digital innovation that can serve as gateways into the digital economy for MSMEs, like Ramesh has asked for, while at the same time addressing long-standing challenges that many of these firms already experience. And these are improved access to finance, operational efficiency, and diversifying revenue streams. So for the first area, we know that access to financing remains a key barrier to the growth of MSMEs. According to the IFC, East Asia and Pacific region accounts for 45% of the global financing gap for MSMEs. And as Ramesh has already pointed out, women-led MSMEs are disproportionately affected. MSMEs face many challenges accessing credit from traditional formal sources, and this may simply be because they can't get to banks, or there might be gaps in formal documentation, or very often a lack of collateral as well. So turning to informal lines of credit may put many at risk of indebtedness, as Ramesh's slide had mentioned. In fact, the Tech for Good Institute report I mentioned earlier found that 60% of MSMEs surveyed were unable to previously access financing when they needed it. And as a comedian Bob Hope once observed, the requirement for formal collateral may mean that financial services may be out of reach of those who might need it the most. And developments, however, in digital finance make it possible to serve the underbanked, including MSMEs. Today, digital financial services providers can use alternative data, such as transaction data and digital footprints, to develop credit risk models for MSMEs. In Southeast Asia, partners like Grab Financial Group, C Money, GoTo Financial have been able to support these firms in this way. These service providers also leverage their extensive digital channels, especially through mobile, to reach customers where they're already active. Online. This is where they connect with friends and family, find entertainment, order food and transport, keep up to date with news, and they're able to reach them outside of the capital cities. The video showed that 80% of MSMEs are outside of the main metropolitan cities. By reaching and serving customers digitally, these companies can scale really quickly. Of course, the rise of fintech or digital-first financial services providers has influenced the whole broader financial ecosystem. So given this new competition, traditional banks have to up their game and pivot digitally. Many are already offering digital services. Others have formed consortiums with digital players to take advantage of the combined credibility, expertise, data, and customer reach to serve new customers, including the underserved segments of MSMEs. Beyond digital finance, data-driven companies can help MSMEs address long-standing pain points. An ecosystem in which digital-first companies understand and serve the needs of MSMEs can enable the growth for both. In March, we featured Logivan in Vietnam, connecting over 40,000 small independent truckers directly to customers. And their MSMEs reduce their logistics costs by up to 30% and can even purchase insurance per shipment to protect their goods. Another such platform connecting and aggregating along the value chain is Ula in Indonesia. Ula's target customer is the owner of a local neighborhood kiosk selling fast-moving consumer goods like food, household items. These kiosks are the last mile of distribution in many parts of Southeast Asia. To replenish supplies, the owner would typically shutter his or her store for the day to visit the wholesaler or local market. And limited by physical geography, the owners often has very limited choice as to which market or which wholesaler they can buy from. ULA offers kiosk owners to have the chance to order stock at very competitive rates and have it delivered to their store at a very small fee. So there's no downtime, and kiosk owners can compare prices, which improves their bottom line. With an aggregated view of demand, ULA is also able to provide business intelligence to kiosk owners. For example, kiosk owners can learn about promising new categories or products to help them improve their range. What Logivan and ULA share are really deep insights into the pain points and needs of MSMEs. And as Ramesh has mentioned, it's so important to hear directly from SMEs to develop fit for purpose solutions to be able to ensure their growth. Companies like ULA and Logivan may help MSMEs diversify their ability to serve customers, improve their operational efficiencies, but platforms can also enable MSMEs to diversify on the demand side as well. So the third area of digital innovation is for MSMEs to diversify their revenue streams across product, customer, and geographies. And this will make MSMEs more resilient to economic shocks or downturns. So say you're a street foods vendor or a smallholder farmer, your customer base is traditionally quite limited. Digital platforms, especially those paired with delivery or logistics services, enable them to reach and serve customers beyond their immediate geographies. We saw this to great effect during the pandemic, when farmers in Malaysia saw their regular sales channels shrink, when their wholesale markets and restaurants closed. Lazada set up a virtual store to connect farmers and retail customers directly. And within a month, about 70 tons of produce that would normally have just rotted and been thrown away were delivered directly to homes, cushioning COVID-19's impact on their farmers. Of course, these services do come with fees, which the platforms then use to invest into their tech solutions. So if you're a new digital first business, you can account for a different type of cost structure because you're starting up. But if you're a traditional business, you might find yourself shouldering sunk costs while also needing to invest in new operational costs to enter the digital economy. So the challenge for a diverse local business environment is to encourage new business models while supporting the digital pivot for traditional businesses. These three areas, access to finance, improving efficiencies, and diversification, are only three of many promising ways that the digital economy can help shape a better environment for MSMEs for the future. But for this promise to materialize, I'd like to highlight three areas that would benefit from continued attention, investment, and collaboration. The first is connectivity, then capability building, and then trust. With respect to investment in connectivity, we have to continue investing in physically as well as digitally connecting citizens. The promise of the digital age will remain unrealized to most MSMEs if they don't have electricity, transport, or digital access. According to the International Energy Agencies, around 65 million people across ASEAN do not have access to electricity. Ramesh spoke about our existential climate challenge in Southeast Asia. Sustainable electricity supplies, whether grid-based or decentralized, is needed for low-carbon inclusive growth for the region. Beyond electricity, some 150 million adults in Southeast Asia, nearly a third of our population, still lack access to digital technologies. COVID-19 may have been a great boon for digitalization, but the impact of a lack of access was also keenly felt by citizens, even in areas beyond business, including education, health, public information, etc. Once you have the access, the digital divide can only be bridged with investment in skills and capability building. And this will allow not just to MSME transformation, but also broader digital citizenship. Recent research by the Tech for Good Institute found that digital literacy in individuals predicted adoption of digital financial services, such as e-wallets, investments, loans, and insurance. So digital literacy plays a really important role in economic integration. Companies can work together to foster digital literacy. Microsoft, for example, partnered with Grab to make its digital literacy certification program available to driver and delivery partners through the Grab app. And in 2020 alone, the program reached nearly 500,000 individuals. And as with individuals, digitalization for small business is an ongoing shift rather than just a one-time switch. Government, civil society, and industry can work together to make digital education and literacy a priority for MSMEs. The Malaysian Digital Economy Corporation, for example, has set up community-level digital entrepreneurship centers to provide ongoing support and training for small business owners, and to also hear from them, as Ramesh has pointed out. And last but not least, a thriving local business environment requires trust. And in particular, responsible data sharing is vital to building trust in the digital economy. Singapore has a trusted data sharing framework, which attempts to foster such trust, providing mechanisms for defining the value of data, outlining key trust principles, and establishing baseline best practices. Open data can also catalyze business innovation. The data.gov platform in Singapore, for example, provides 1,800 data sets for business use, and companies can use this for business intelligence. Cross-border data sharing is also needed for the larger MSMEs, the M and the E's, to grow beyond national boundaries. Last March, we spoke of cooperation across ASEAN that has enabled the ASEAN framework for personal data protection and the ASEAN model contractual clauses for cross-border data flows. What we need now is for companies to be aware of this and to adopt these efforts to enable their market growth while ensuring responsible data stewardship and encouraging innovation. In conclusion, a sound business environment for MSMEs for the future is digitally enabled, inclusive, and data-driven. And there are many exciting areas for innovation and investment, and I've only just mentioned a few. Digital participation by MSMEs of all sizes is vital for the effective and efficient private sector recovery in Southeast Asia. This is a must-win challenge for us. Everyone here today, as well as regional organizations, governments, civil society, and companies, I really hope we can work together to build a more inclusive and resilient region together. Thank you very much for your attention. Please get in touch with the Tech for Good Institute via LinkedIn. We would love to continue this conversation with you. Back to you, James.
Thank you, Ms. Min Tang. A lot of content there. I'm so happy to hear that digital is going to be here forever. And just reading through some of my notes, services at the tip of our fingertips, expansion of geography from local to global, easy payment options. And I was so happy to hear about the ability of technology to create information to address market failure. This is really a game changer. And then when you talk about the three areas for future work in terms of access, addressing the digital divide, and last but not the least is actually strengthening our ability to safeguard consumers in terms of cybercrime or even identity theft. These are actually important issues. So as we all know, as in any good story, we usually have trilogies in the movie. So let me call on Michael Schaefer, who will now deliver, who is a senior visiting fellow from the Institute of Southeast Asian Study in Singapore, and he will deliver the keynote presentation on our policy brief on how to build better local businesses environment for pandemic recovery in Southeast Asia. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thanks, James, and hello everyone right around the region. Thank you very much. What I'm going to do is a little bit more context about that question James just threw at the very end there. How do we move to actually implementing some of these policies, and how do we make sure that in doing so, we genuinely take into account the characteristics, the concerns, and the future possibilities that exist for micro, small, and medium-sized businesses. So what I'm quickly going to touch through is a couple of dimensions about small businesses themselves, a little bit about how we have and haven't framed policy frameworks, and how we can better understand the sector and work with them going forward in this important work. So if we can, we'll just flick through to the next slide. By way of background, my background is both a mix of scholarly research, a large amount of time working directly with small businesses, and also in government and regulatory organisations that have dealt directly with SMEs at the forefront of their day-to-day concerns. And in doing so, I think one of the striking things is that a small business is not a big business shrunken down. A small business is fundamentally quite a different organisation to what a large business is. And I think that's the very first point we want to think about here. So Ramesh pointed out earlier on, as we also showed in the introductory video, that SMEs are by far and away the biggest single component of the business community right across the region. And here's a snapshot, as you can see, of just a couple of countries focused around the Mekong Delta region and the greater Mekong area. Right across Southeast Asia, small businesses, micro businesses, medium-sized firms collectively employ more than 200 million people, and there are more than 70 million of them. And they range in size from more than 60 million in Indonesia right through to 6,000 in Brunei. We have about 3 million that we know of in Thailand, and about 5 million, for example, in Vietnam as well. But running a small business, as I said, is not the same as operating a large business. It is an intensely personal exercise, largely driven by the owner-operators, the people who start, run, grow the business, have the vision for it, usually fund, at least in the early stages, most of its operations, and who personally take on most of the risk and reward. They don't always operate for purely economic or profit maximising reasons. There are also intensely personal drivers as well, both family and otherwise. And what we end up with, of course, is a community of businesses that are very large in number, sometimes hard for us to reach and to understand, that are found in almost every sector, profession, industry, trade, right across the region, and many of which still remain overwhelmingly informal. And surprisingly for many people, the very largest, biggest group are the micro-sized firms. For example, in Vietnam, it's estimated about 97% of all firms are micro-sized. In Thailand, it's in the vicinity of at least 85%. We simply don't know enough about all of those aspects of the sector to actually fill out that picture. So how do we go about helping them? That's the nature of the beast. How do we go about helping them? Next slide, please. Well, the very first thing we need to know is how easy is it to get into the marketplace, and what matters to a business in making that decision to actually operate as a business. So the institutional, the structural issues, the basic background that allows someone to actually open and trade a business with a degree of confidence is still a challenge in many parts of the region. We know, for example, that, as you can see here on this slide, that a very large proportion of firms still operate effectively as informal enterprises. And that's a risk not only for the business owner, it's a risk for the employees because they don't have the protections that persons working in a registered firm do. It's a risk for consumers and other businesses that trade with them because, again, it's hard to enforce contractual and other obligations to ensure certainty of the product or services being delivered. And it's a challenge for governments, not only in terms of taxing and registering and monitoring and policing them, but also in terms of being able to communicate with them and in order to be able to help them grow further beyond where they are. So lesser developed governance systems, as we put up there, are an issue. And there is an ongoing problem here about lack of regulatory capacity and about the way in which we actually ensure that we provide a stable basic background for people to operate in. Next slide. Traditionally, governments have looked at supporting micro, small and medium-sized firms, especially before COVID, in one of two ways. The big picture, the macro level process, was to think about, if you want to conceive it this way, the infrastructure. How do we provide the rules, the frameworks, the communication services? Ming just talked about, for example, making sure that digital access is available. How do we set the tax regimes? How do we ensure that finance is available? And then there was another aspect, which of course was looking at the individual owner-operator, their level of knowledge, their training, their access to finance, their ability to employ people, to find premises, to understand what a business plan was, and such like. During COVID, much of that focus switched very quickly and probably on a necessity basis to far more focus not on encouraging new businesses, but on survival for existing business firms. What sort of tax regimes do we put in place? How do we make it easier for them to survive? How do we allow them to actually manage their debt and keep trading, keep their doors open, keep their employees on the payroll. So much of that has provided a short-term response to a survivalist mode, if you want to think about that. Next slide. But what we face now as we come out of COVID is actually looking at new issues and new trends as well. I won't go through all of these in detail, and of course, they're welcome to look at the material that we provide when we subsequently publish our report. But some key elements here. I've mentioned the fact that the basic regulatory frameworks need to be considered. We are working into an environment, though, in which inflation is becoming more pronounced. Laos, for example, has experienced a large jump in inflationary pressures in recent times. We have emerging trade configurations and blocks. We have a challenge about supply lines. We have a challenge about almost competing different trade regimes with other larger nations in and outside the region. As populations age across Southeast Asia, the demography of consumers, but also business owners, will also change. Ming has also spoken extensively about digital economy, but one of the other big ones, of course, sitting there that we all need to deal with is climate change. And that's going to affect not only adaptation, but also the ability, for example, to survive increasing numbers of extreme weather events, which are going to impose more costs and provide more of a threat to ongoing viability, an almost existential threat to many businesses, as well as perhaps demographic changes as sea levels rise, temperatures change, and that will produce its own set of economic shocks. So how do we pull all these together into a framework that can make a bit of sense? Well, traditionally, we've looked at things on a case-by-case basis. We looked at one issue, then a second issue, and one policy tool or another. Perhaps now it's time to think about this in a far more holistic manner. Next slide, thanks. And to consider the idea of mapping things much more as an ecosystem, a set of integrated factors, each of which actually has an impact on the small business operator, whether it be their personal and familial goals for why they're in business, whether it be their ability to access finance, competent staff, whether the physical infrastructure, the roads, the electricity, access to premises, whether they're available, whether we have a community or society or a set of government values that actively foster entrepreneurship or are either indifferent or reluctant towards it. If we have business advisory services, each of these interacts onto the small business. And traditionally, we have not stepped back to try and map not only how each of these directly impacts a firm on a one-to-one basis, but also how they work between themselves. I mean, for example, Ming has mentioned digitalization is not only going to have a direct impact, but is also going to have on a firm itself, but also on many of the ways in which, for example, it may be able to access finance in the future, the way in which it might be able to actually overcome some of the shortfalls in infrastructure and transport and related matters. So the next step and the final slide for me here today, conscious of time, is understanding the ecosystems in which businesses operate. Can we map these out? If we are going to transform policy and if we are going to foster not only a build back better, but also an even more vibrant small business sector, we need to understand the entirety of the ecosystem in which they work. The institutional factors, the community in which they work, the level of knowledge businesses have, the digital context, and a variety of others. And we need to see how these work together, not treat them as one-by-one cases. It's a challenge, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the questions, but I'll leave it at that point in the interests of time and hand it back to you, James.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, always, unmuting is always quite complex when it's in a webinar, but you have said many things there. You said behavior is quite important in terms of how MSME operate, both the macro environment, the managing the challenges that we are facing in terms of inflation, in terms of rising debt. There are micro considerations as well related to regulations, related to the growth of digital, and all those different factors are actually shaping when we talk about how MSME can actually help build back better during this inclusive recovery. Now, let me open the formal panel discussion so that we can really talk more about what are needed to make these things happen. And today, we are fortunate to be joined by 5 policymakers from the region, and let me introduce them one by one. The first one is Mr. Pen Sovichet, who is the Undersecretary of State, Ministry of Commerce, Cambodia. Thank you, Mr. Pen. The second one is Mr. Apisid Singh Sorivong, Director General, Enterprise Registration Department, Ministry of Industry and Commerce from Lao PDR. The third one is Mr. Odette Sovanavung, President of the Lao National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you to be with us. Then we also have Mr. Pam Ngoktach, Deputy Director General, Legal Department of VCCI. And last but not the least, Mr. Ho Wan Tran, who is a senior official, Ministry of Industry and Trade from Vietnam. So let me ask the first question to Mr. Pen. In the case of Cambodia, Mr. Pen, we would be grateful to hear from you the lessons, the success stories, or policies or programs that work to support MSME development in the country. What do you think can be done more in terms of business registrations or policy processes or licensing so that we can help them flourish during this pandemic recovery? Back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk in this webinar. I just want to share some points because time is constrained. I think 5 minutes is not enough, but at least I can share something. So in terms of SME, I think you already see the show the data providing by Michael on the number of SME in Cambodia, and you see that the importance of this SME is so much needed for Cambodia for the growth of the economy. We in the Ministry of Commerce, we developed some policy to support the SME in terms of first providing the market access. It means either through the local business market access. I mean, maybe a little bit ambition that we want to push them to produce more, maybe to substitute the import of some of the consumer goods, and maybe lead to the export purpose, etc. Second point, we support them to the policy that we enact is to support them to go along with the digitalization society. It means e-commerce or online transaction, etc. The third point is to provide them with the skill. It means skill for the entrepreneur, the startup, and they have to learn how to be a businessman, and they also have to learn how to go along with the digitalization. They have to know how to use at least a little about the evolution of the technology that right now people buying online or selling online, or at least maybe payment online. The fourth point is we support them through the exhibition and the campaigns that we let people buying Cambodian product. It means local exhibition and international exhibition. And we try to campaign, we say, we promote the Cambodian product through one village, one product, etc. And the fifth point, we promote the competitiveness through the coordination with the other ministry. Example, Ministry of Economy and Finance, who right now provides the ability to increase the capacity of SME through the introduction of Khmer Enterprise, which is providing training, capacity building, selecting good enterprise for the easy access of loan, etc. And for the loan, for the access to finance, Ministry of Economy and Finance also support the SME Bank. You may heard about SME Bank of Cambodia, and also the Agriculture and Rural Development Bank. These two institutions provide access to finance. And I heard people talking about collateral, something that you need to prove that you have money and you don't need money, and then they will loan you. It is not really a bank nature here, but we provide through SME Bank and Agricultural and Rural Development Bank, we provide loan to the SME so they can start up and they can move on along with the other, unless they have a good business plan. So this is promote the competitiveness. All these things we can be achieved through the working with closely with the SME Federation. We have SME Federation and also the Chamber of Commerce of Cambodia. They have their own wing to help us to promote all kinds of this. At the same time, when Cambodians start to strengthen the existing market and open up further market access to international market through FTA, the Free Trade Agreement, we also encourage SME to produce something that can export, and we strengthen their own quality by providing the condition, the requirement, technical requirement, etc. for them, so they can have better access and they can meet the requirement of the market. This is the thing that I want to say. At the same time, for Ministry of Commerce, we also build soft infrastructure. We now have adopted 4 laws already. The first law is Consumer Protection Law. The second law is Competition Law. The third law is E-commerce law. And the fourth law is Food Safety Law. I think all 4 laws support environment for trade in the country, and will provide good access for SME to grow. And at the same time, in the ministry, we adopt the easy registration process. You may heard that Cambodia now everything on the registration process, including investment, are online. And we now connect between Ministry of Commerce Registry to Taxation Department, to CDC, Ming Community Development Council for the investment. So when you register, you will get an opportunity to have instantly tax file number, so you can have your own tax certificate, and you've been acknowledged by the related institution that have hooked with us. In case you use expertise of the foreign labor, this system also hooked to the Ministry of Labor for the working permit. So we enlarge all this thing, and it become a one-stop service to provide the registration to make it easier for the SME. Second, for registration, we encourage e-commerce, the people who are informally sell online and delivery good again payment, to go formally, let them join and register or asking or applying for permit from the Ministry of Commerce, so we can use the platform of their own registration to protect the consumer in terms of trust, in terms of return of product, in terms of counterfeiting product, because now in Cambodia, even registration of trademark, trade name, or trade secret are also doing online. We are working in close cooperation with the World Intellectual Property Organization. So we install everything online. People can go online and register their own trademark. This is promote the what we call the use of what we call non-collateral, the collateral that is not a real estate collateral or visual, what we call the visible collateral, to, and encourage the SME to use invisible collateral as their own asset, like name, reputation, etc., business plan, to get loan. So by registering trademark, trade name, they can prove that they have their own business, they have a business cycle. So this can be used to apply for loan. So it's easy access for them in terms of getting loan and in terms of promoting or franchising their own business, their own business name. Another point that I want to mention that we are now implementing a project called Go for eCam project. The project supported by EIF, Enhanced Integrated Framework, which is run by the World Trade Organization, and the government also putting some money to promote this kind of business. And then with this kind of business, we move along, and then we can start with 4 tracks. The first track is create a marketplace. Marketplace can provide you an opportunity, including the SME itself, to participate. We do business to business, business to consumer, and we let them survive by using the platform of Cambodian called Cambodian trade platform. So this provides an opportunity for SME who have no ability to create their own platform to put product on sale and also to interact with each other. So this kind of thing, we cooperate with the Cambodian Post, the telecommunication, that would provide the logistics to delivery. We call last mile delivery, that bring the product to the door of the buyer. We try to eliminate something that people do payment again delivery, but we encourage them to use bank because they have a form of method of payment through banking. Cambodian National Bank also introduced one of the payment method called Bakong that can do it locally and also internationally. So the Go for eCam project, first we create marketplace. Second, we try to understand the need of the business and consumer. We introduce, we call regulatory sandbox that we consult with the consumer and business to create a regulation to facilitate the growth of the SME. And third, we do the skill promotion. It means we let them teach each other and provide business model to each other so they can share the experience, they can share the lesson learned, so we can improve the process even in the local process, or maybe we do the cross-border trade. And the fourth one, we keep this marketplace living by asking the private sector to share. It means to take over when it comes to the end of the project. So this is something that
Mr. Pen, would you be able to wrap up soon?
Yeah, I think this is something that I can share right now. So all in all, I think for my country, we try to use SME as a backbone for economic growth, and we try all the best to support SME. And we push forward that we understand a lot of women participate in this process. So we want to have a good access for women working from home, so they can doing business from home. This is a plus business, so they can work and also can take care of the household chore also. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Pen. Now let me turn on to Mr. Afisid Sengsorebong. We know that in 2018, the Lao PDR commenced with a comprehensive program towards improving business licensing to bring in more enterprise into the formal economy. We would be happy, Mr. Afisid, to hear what has been the key success story of this program, what has worked, and what more can be done to streamline the process of business registration. The floor is yours, Mr. Afisid.
Thanks, James, and thank ADB for the opportunity for joining this webinar. And good morning, afternoon, everyone on speaker and panelists and also on the participants. Let me share with you on the experience of Lao PDR. As James had mentioned, I think Lao PDR, the government have been paying more attention on the how can we improve the business environment in Lao PDR since 2018, actually, especially on the to respond to the assessment from the international organization, including World Bank and also what the ADB have issued on the, I think, provincial facilitation for investment and trade or fulfilled in Laos that make we are reflect ourselves that what we have been doing right now is the environment for the business is very difficult in Laos when what the ranking is 154 for the starting business. I think is 181 from the 190 country and that means we are make this business environment is difficult for the investor. That means that make the government put into the government agenda by issuing the PM order number 2. And with this ministry, we want aside to improve the starting the business under this indicator. I think that we luckily have the what they call support by ADB. We have the improving from the system, governance system, and also the regulation. Since 2018, we have the centralized system for issuing the enterprise registration certificate that make we can investor can ask for the business certificate. Right now, 167 office, including the central and provincial and district office. That means by doing so, we try helping the MSE can be from formal sector, can be enter into the formal sector more and more for them to easy to get the business activity and a certificate that can help them to access for more favorable condition for the bank loan and everything. These are really help reducing the difficulty for the enterprise registration. With this, and then we also helping, trying to reduce the number of the days by right now we in reduction from 9 steps to 3 steps and also reduce from the 179 to the only 70 days. The investor can get the operate business certificate. This on we doing by the improving the what they call monitor, improving the system for management environment and enterprise register, and also we also put the system for the monitoring for the which to see how the provincial and district the date from the issuing the operating license and enterprise certificate. These are we are doing, and also for the helping more in the future. We are right now trying to develop the how to help the online system as the, I think, trying to using the other experience, how investor can be registered online. This is one of the we are trying to do right now. And also beside an enterprise certificate, we also what they call cooperation with other line ministry to develop the and streamlining the issuing operating license from the line ministry. These are really the one issue that's really controversial and very difficult for the ministry and also the department in order to work with line ministry, how they streamlining and also the what they call reducing the business activity for issuing the operating license. That to I think to an issue that we are trying to do in the future. One is the online and also the operating license with the line ministry. That I think that we are trying to help an investor right now. That I think what I can say with the experience of that we are the government trying and very much pay attention and trying to improve this business and environment, try for the SME to get more and easier for the enterprise and certificate, and also getting easier for the operating license, and much ask them for get and favorable access to or finance and other supporting policy from the government. This are one of the one of the thing that the government and also ministry try to improve for the MSME and as well as the investor as a whole. That's I think what I want to share with the.
Thank you, Mr. Afisid. That's really great. Let me now turn to Mr. Odette. Mr. Odette, I'd like to talk about the dialogue between the private and the public sector. As mentioned by Michael, partnership is actually quite important in promoting better local business environment. In the case of the Lao PDR Chamber of Commerce and Industry, what have been some of the key lessons and the best practices on how to build a better public-private dialogue, and what are some of the key results that you've achieved so far in your dialogue with government? The floor is yours, Mr. Odette.
Okay, thank you for inviting me to the web seminar. Actually, in Lao PDR, under the Lao National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we have a number of public and private dialogue platforms. The most important one is the Lao Business Forum, which is supported by the World Bank. And we have a number of provincial business forum, which is done in the large provinces in Lao PDR. We recently also have a platform that we created based on the many countries in the GMS and also supported by the ADB. It's a provincial facilitation for investment and trade index called PROFIT. And we are at the Series 2 now. So public and private dialogue is very important, you know that. And we also, in LNCCI, I call it Chamber of Commerce, we also intend to extend the dialogue to the district level, because where the SME are most located, and also the non-formal sector is moving around quite sharply. One important thing I really support the presentation, the two presentation. And yes, SMEs and MSMEs in Laos and the region have quite a big challenge to recover. High business costs, debt, loss of capital, uncertainty, and on the new policies by the government, inflation to external sector. And of course, there are also some challenges for the SME I want to add is the market reopening and changes that SME is not aware of, the high cost of logistics is not coming up, the change of market line. They have also difficulties in finding manpower because they have closed their industries for many years. And so manpower is also a big problem. And so the access to finance also is one of the issues that we also want to rehabilitate in the reopening. So I want to give you the importance of public and private dialogue. Of course, the problem we have in the public and private dialogue, we started in 2005 and many things. And the last study we made with the ADB on the profit is that there are still a regulatory burden, many regulation, too many process, what SME cannot comply with. So they don't register, or they don't register fully. I think in the report it shows. So there are also transparency of information, business friendly to the SMEs also, and informal charges. That is what we saw, and also it's still there, and we need to really to change that. SMEs and especially women businesses are disadvantaged by excessive regulation requirement. There are additional requirements, and there are continuing informal practices. So in the last report we have is that informal charge increased during COVID is increasing also. So that is for regulation, license permit, and so on. So that's why in the chamber we have to put that back into the table of negotiation with the government again, and that is quite important for the public and private dialogue is very important. And usually informal charges is not at central level. They are at provincial and district level. And they are also in some of the area at village level. So that's why the public and private dialogue is very important to extend it to the village, district, and the grassroots level, and also to enhance entrepreneurship into those people in the countryside. So we have raised that cost of doing business is high, and we have informal practices. So we need business environment reforms, and also government is now the Lao government is now ongoing a large economic and financial reform on the macro level, but at the micro level we need a real business environment reforms. And the thing is that what is happening in Laos, I mean, I think it also happened in other countries, that we are very good in changing the rules, adaptation of the regulation and so on. But in its application, it's nil. Nothing is done, really. Or if you apply it, new regulation coming up. So that, and what is obstructing the doing business environment. So that is what we think that. So what was the recommendation we had? And is that we need a reform agenda for business environment, and with an effective and efficient to have the participation of all businesses from district to to central level network. I think the Chamber of Commerce, Lao LNCCI is moving on that direction. Now we are establishing district Chamber of Commerce to be able to collect the information what it is needed, and also to get a proper dialogue between public and private at district level. And I think that is coming up, and especially after COVID, and work on the COVID recovery. We have a platform for access to finance, and NCCI signed contract with commercial banks, provide the credit, and also help SMEs to get the into accountings and also to be able to access finance. And also digitalization is important. We just encourage SMEs to go digital to really access, and also, like you said, the knowledge about digitalization is very low. So we have to really increase this knowledge at the lower level. So this is what we can do with public and private dialogue. And the focus is on implementation of not on paper and then only. So that is also, so yes, there's been a lot of change, not improvement in Lao PDR, but that is not enough. So that is my statement. Thank you very much. James, you are muted.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Mr. Odeb. Sorry for that. Yes, informal business charges is really a big issue, and Michael and us were discussing it before the start of the dialogue. Let me now turn on to Mr. Pham. Mr. Pham, with respect to the Provincial Competitiveness Index, which has become a very famous example on how to promote competition and how the MSME can communicate with the local government. What's the experience of Cambodia? What are the secret for success? And what are some of the examples that can be probably learned by other countries? Mr. Pham?
Yep, thank you, James, and good morning, everyone. It's my great honor to be invited to join this important event. Let me introduce briefly about my organization. Vietnam, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry was established in 1963. It's the national organization representing for the business community in Vietnam, and our main function is to protect legitimate rights and interests of enterprise in Vietnam, and we provide recommendation to the government to improve the business environment. And we conduct many activities, among which the Provincial Competitiveness Index is really one of the outstanding program that we work with. We collaborate with the USAID, the United States Agency for International Development. And the PCI program was first launched in 2005 under the project which focused on improving the business environment in Vietnam. Until now, this program have about 17 years focused on measuring the economic governance and efforts of the provincial government to reform administrative and create an enabling business environment that promotes enterprise, the domestic private sector development in Vietnam. A province that is considered have performing well on the PCI or have a good business environment for private sector is the one that has low entry costs for business startup, easy access to land and security of business permits, it should have transparent business environment and equitable access and information for businesses. And it should have a kind of, limited time requirement for administrative procedure and inspection. And the firm, the enterprise conduct the business there should have a kind of minimal informal charge. I mean, they should not pay price to the government official. And 7, the provincial leadership should have kind of proactive and creative in solving problems for enterprise. That province should have a kind of high quality business support service and should have a kind of sound labor training policy. And final, that province should have fair and effective legal procedure for dispute resolution and maintaining law and order. So for the PCI program, I mean, what we have maintained successfully this program, and it contributes to the development of private sector in Vietnam because it tackles the bottlenecks in business climates in Vietnam, especially at the local level. It's a kind of evidence-based approach designed by VCCI based on the reality of Vietnam and to address the development issues in my country. And we try to, and it's also focused on improving the quality of public policy and regulation, and also for the public service is the promote the development of micro, small and medium enterprise in Vietnam, and also have kind of decentralization in Vietnam. So the main factor that contribute to the success of PCI is also the transparency in development of PCI and the publication of our research, and also finding. We encourage government, provincial government, to improve the economic governance on the basic good practice, which already available in Vietnam. And it's really, we design the index with indicator that easy for local government for taking action. So that's the reason why they can be maintained in nearly 20 years. But it's important because its usefulness. For example, over the years now, I mean, many domestic and foreign enterprise considers the PCI as important support for making investment decision in Vietnam, and the local government use the PCI as a measure of reform implementation in their province, and many other, especially for the business association, they can use PCI to conduct a business dialogue with the local government. Central government also use PCI data to monitoring the reform agenda in Vietnam, and many other stakeholders also use PCI in Vietnam. And overall, the PCI bring some benefits like empower the voice of private sector in Vietnam, promote reform from the bottom up, and drive the change in governance in Vietnam. And we receive a kind of strong support from the business community in Vietnam. You can see by the number of enterprise that respond to our survey here. with about 100 firm response. It means that one among 5 enterprise in Vietnam already joined that survey. And for the PCI, we can try the change in government. Just some example here you can see about when we conduct the survey and also
Mr. Touch, can you wrap up in a minute?
Okay, sure. Yes. And here and PCI also, you know, have provide to many countries to learn. And even from Laos, CCI, we also went there and share our knowledge. And PCI, in the PCI survey, we also get a lot of information related to what happened in the economy of Vietnam. For example, with the impact on enterprise. As you can see here, 92% firm in Vietnam last year got a negative impact of the COVID-19, and also is also led to the business confidence of enterprise in Vietnam is also very low. So for the success of PCI, we is include, you know, the first one, we promote decentralization to the subnational level. We improve the policy implementation, increase the private sector role, and promote anti-corruption, transparency, accountability of the government, and also promote the voice of enterprise in Vietnam. So that is my.
Thank you, Mr. Pham. Let me now turn on to Mr. Tran. For Vietnam, again, what more can be done for MSME development, in particular in terms of streamlining business registration and licensing to enable firms to flourish? Mr. Tran?
Thank you, James. Thank you, ADB, for having me in this webinar, and good morning, everyone. So my sharing today is I would like to share with you our macro policy in terms of how the government decides the macro policy to support SME to overcome the COVID-19 and recover after the pandemic. So I don't want to say that Vietnam, we are successful in dealing with the COVID-19, but I think that our government try our best to minimize the spread of the COVID and the negative impact to the economy and particularly to the enterprises. So as you may know that Vietnam is one of the few countries in the world still remain our positive growth rates through the COVID and until now. And just to give you a very data that in the first 5 months of this year, the number of new business establishment and the return to operate in my country is increase again after a long time we decreased because of the COVID, and it reached the highest growth rate ever. So you can see that the enterprise return to operate after, you know, the COVID. So there are 2 lessons learned from Vietnam that I would like to share with you about how the government decides the policy to help enterprise, especially SME, to overcome the COVID. First is that in terms of our national approach to deal with the COVID-19, so our government tried to set up or to bring a national consensus for the whole country to deal with the COVID. And the government called for or involve all people in the society to join hands with the government to help the country fighting with the COVID. So the government say that, you know, the COVID is not the responsibility of the government, but it also the responsibility for the whole citizen, for the every stakeholder in the country, from the central government to the local government, and from the enterprise association, non-government organization, and the citizen. So by doing so, the government, decide a national framework that includes the plan and solution to support for the MSME to dealing with or removing difficulty in products being produced, production, and to access the market, and to ensure the social security for the worker and the people. And also we issue the urgent solution and measure for the pandemic prevention and control for the pandemic period of time, and for the medium term, and particularly in 2022 and 2023, the government has issued a national program on the pandemic prevent and control. And we also issue the national program on the socio-economic recovery and economic development for the period of time from 2022 to 2023, where we set up the target for the country to overcome the COVID. Also allocate the government budget for the helping the SME to overcome the difficulty from the negative impact of the COVID. And allocate the role and responsibility for the government officer from the central government to the local government to join hand to work together to help the SME to overcome the COVID-19. That is the first lesson learned from the Vietnam in terms of how the government decides over the policy for dealing with the COVID. The second lesson that focusing very detail on how we decide the policy and program to support the MSME to dealing with or to recover after the pandemic period of time. So the government have been issued very comprehensive policy package where we focus on some very specific areas that I would like to share with you. Is that first is about the fiscal policy. So the government, extend or reduce or extend the time of the paying tax from the enterprise. For example, with the VAT tax, we reduce from the 10% to 8%. And we also reduce the tax for the export and imports and the enterprise income and the enterprise. And we also reduce the price of some goods and services that are controlled by the government, like electricity bill or water bill. And the scale of the fiscal policy that we support for the enterprise in last 2 years, 2020 and 2021, is account for around 4% of our total GDP. And the second is about the monetary policy, where the government try to support the enterprise in terms of we support them to reduce the interest rates. That if an enterprise that they want to borrow money from the financial the commerce banks, they can get the support from government 2% of interest rates. And even though if the enterprise borrow money from the Vietnam Bank for social policy, they can get 0% of interest rate if that loan for the paying the wage for the or salary for the worker. And in terms of the market policy, we try to promote the digital development, that we focus on the e-commerce. So for the e-commerce, because of the difficulty to access the shop or something like that, and the government tried to promote the digitalization, especially for the e-commerce. And the statistics showing that the market of e-commerce in Vietnam increased to from 15 to 20% last 2 years. Comparing the domestic consumption or retail volume is reduced for last 2 years. And
Mr. Tran, if you could wrap up in 1 minute, please.
Yes, just on the one last lesson is that in terms of ensuring the security for the worker, so the government tried to support for the worker for the house renting, or even though we support by cash to the worker that get in negative from the COVID, or we also we support bycard for the worker who lost job from the COVID and that stopped from working and have no salary. So we got a time constraint, so I stop my sharing here. So thank you very much for everyone to hearing me. Back to you, James.
Thank you, Mr. Tran. We are now on overtime, but because the topic is really very rich, I think the audience wouldn't mind giving a chance to both Ms. Ming Tang and Michael to have the last message. So I'll call first on Ms. Ming Tang to give the last parting message, probably a two-minute message, Mr. Ming Tang, on how we can leverage digital technology to assist MSME development. Back to you, Ms. Ming Tang.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, James. Perhaps one of the things I could focus on that Ramesh mentioned earlier, but we didn't really have much time to discuss, is the role in which platform companies can help to drive not just MSME growth, but green MSME growth, given the fact that platforms have a central role in catalyzing and shaping digital transformation. And it's really important because many of the MSMEs start their digital journeys with platform companies. So I'll just give two quick examples. If you look at the carbon footprint, we talked about this existential challenge for Southeast Asia to net zero. Platform companies can really incentivize action across great scale that otherwise would not have been taken. So for example, if you look at electric vehicles not feasible in many places in Southeast Asia because there's just no charging infrastructure. So the leading online to offline players in this space, Gojek, for example, and Grab, have partnered with Gogoro and Pertamina to advance this agenda. So instead of waiting for the infrastructure to be ready, what they're trialing are battery swap stations for the two-wheeler vehicles like motorbikes. And then this minimizes downtime drivers and increases adoption. Platform companies also have a really unique relationship with consumers because they hold a relationship to consumers across many different verticals. And so if you look at Food Panda, for example, just by putting a very simple opt-out for cutlery toggle, that has saved over 160 million pieces of single-use cutlery since its launch. So I think my last point I just wanted to share is that platform companies can serve as a vital bridge between policymakers, merchants, and consumers to be able to nudge all of these different stakeholders towards greener behaviors.
Thank you, Ms. Ming Tang. Now I'll turn to Michael to deliver the last message. Michael, you have 2 minutes. Thanks.
Thanks, James. I just want to make a comment about where do we go to from here in terms of ensuring that all of the good issues that are discussed are actually actionable. And I think that requires, in some senses, a couple of specific measures by public policy agencies, by governments and departments. And I think they fall into the following areas. I think, first of all, there is a need for good data and research about the MSME sector. We are still in a region where different countries have different definitions. We publish the information at different times. It's got different levels of detail and complexity. And so we are unable as a region to actually look at the sector. We cannot tell you how many businesses closed during COVID authoritatively because we don't know. We don't know many new ones. We don't know how many of them fall into the micro, small and medium sizes respectively, because they are all slightly different. So each of these are challenges. So research is one. Second one is, as Mr. Odette and a number of others pointed out, we do need to ensure that there is a genuine voice for SMEs in the decision-making process, and that will require a degree of capacity building. Public servants, government officials typically don't have a background in business, and they need to have more direct-hand experience of it. Likewise, many people in the small business sector find it difficult to engage with government because they've never worked in government. So we need to spend more time even just explaining to each other how those different views of the world work before we start trying to actually sort of say, how does one help the other? So I think there are two really important steps. The third one is we also need to get a better understanding of where businesses do go for information and trusted advice. There's a whole range of indicators that suggest, unfortunately, that it's many other sources rather than government authorities. For example, their accountants, their Chamber of Commerce, their industry association. So we need to spend a bit more time understanding those in order to ensure that there is a genuine voice. And the final one is that small businesses have different concerns sometimes to large businesses, and we need to be mindful of that and remember that at all times as well. Simple steps, but we can action them in quite straightforward ways. I'll leave it there, James. It's a topic for another webinar one day.
Thank you, Michael. There you go. And we hope you enjoyed our webinar and learned something from it. We also want to thank all the speakers, and we also apologize we couldn't give you more time. And last but not the least, please watch out for our report on how to improve local business environment for SME participation and economic recovery in Southeast Asia. Thank you.